Now we're just so far removed from that process. And as you become further and further removed from the source of what you're eating, it's incumbent upon us just to ask more questions. And most people don't. Most people are, I don't want to use the word ignorant, but they just assume that simply because it's allowed to be sold, surely it must be good for you. And honestly, who can blame them? I'd love to live in a world where we don't have to ask. Whatever is, sold on the shelf, whether it's food, personal care products, cleaning product, makeup, whatever it is, we just can assume that it's safe. And this is the mentality that most people operate under, and the mentality that, bless my poor mum, she used to operate under. So she used to bring stuff in the house and she would be like, Soulla, surely if it's allowed to be sold, it's got to be safe. And it was a dark day for me when I realised that is a myth, and then that I had to shatter that. And it behooves us as individuals, as conscious consumers, that sadly we have to make our own due diligence. We've got to do our own due diligence and ask those questions, because if we don't do it, nobody else will.
Welcome to The Body Never Lies. I'm your host, Leila Lutz. Each week, myself and experts from around the world help you uncover the secret ways your body communicates with you to empower you in your own individual health journey. Now, learning how to shop and learning how to cook are probably the two most important things that you can do for your health. It makes you so empowered because you can really control what you're putting in your body in a good way. But what we need to remember is that we need to set up our environment for success, and we also need to get our head around a lot of these limitations and beliefs around cooking being too hard, cooking having to be, extravagant and amazing, and really getting down to the fact that 10 minutes of prep time should be enough for a good, healthy meal. So I've invited a friend and colleague onto the show today, Soulla Chamberlain, who is a corporate lawyer turned health coach, and her business emerged out of a passion to create a line of organic, artisanal, whole food products that didn't exist in the market. So she's a devoted mother of two. She's a real and traditional foods cooking instructor. She's an author of some cookbooks. She has some amazing online cooking courses, and she has the first store in Sydney that is a solely dedicated broth bar. And she is the person I send my clients to when they come to me and they're too overwhelmed in the beginning to cook, or if they need to supplement with certain superfoods that they haven't got their head around making themselves yet. And I've often sent people to her if they're recovering from cancer or in hospital, so she will do a meal service for them until we can get to the stage where they're ready to cook for themselves. So I just wanted to preface a little bit though, when I was listening back to the interview, to just make sure that the messaging is congruent with all the other podcasts. There is a bit in the interview where Soulla talks about cutting out sugar, and I really just wanted to emphasize that she's talking about cutting out sugars in junk foods and packaged foods. I'm just really wary of making sure the message is congruent, that you do need carbohydrates, and we've talked a lot about that in the other episodes. So root vegetables and fruits, and they need to make up every meal that you eat. So without further ado, welcome to the show, and here's Soulla Chamberlain. Soulla Chamberlain, thank you so much for coming on the show. Welcome to The Body Never Lies.
Thanks, Leila. Thanks for having me.
Now, you're such a passionate person on social media, getting so many important messages across. But one thing that you always talk about that is really important, obviously, for the show, The Body Never Lies, is how your body spoke so many truths to you about health and what was happening on the protocol that you were following that you thought was healthy, and that sparked your journey for your business. So I'd love to hear that story.
Sure. So I grew up with Greek migrant parents. So while we had an abundance of really beautiful homegrown food, my parents also, when they came to Australia, were seduced by the whole, white refined bread, white refined sugar. We had margarine, we had Coca-Cola. They didn't know any better, okay? So I had more than my fair share of processed foods growing up. And then during my 20s, I was working crazy long hours as a corporate lawyer, just eating takeout, fast food, in artificial lights, hardly slept, alcohol, never saw the light of day really. And my first big breakdown basically happened in my mid-20s. And that was basically my wake-up call. That was sort of my body saying to me, you can't keep going on. You are literally broken. When you end up in a hospital bed, wetting yourself and having to take 2 months off work. And every time you went to, get back to it, the universe would just throw something else my way. And that was, my first big wake-up call when I thought, okay, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. The universe is sending me really loud and clear signals, but I was just so disconnected from my body. Like back then there weren't, the podcast and the health and wellness books. And, someone asked me once, what is your intuition telling you? And I just kind of looked at them blankly and I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, we're taught to kind of think from the head up and not really turn inward. So that was the universe sort of saying to me at the age of 26 years old, you've got to turn inwards and you've got to ask yourself what is really going on, and are your lifestyle choices really congruent with vibrant health? And I didn't really know where to start, what to do. As I said, there weren't the abundance of resources we have now. And I basically just first of all turned to nature. I just had this inner intuition that, okay, I don't know what to do, where to go, what to do for work. I'm Adelaide, I don't have a support network. And I just started trekking. I just started getting out into nature because it just felt right. And then from there I got into yoga, and then one door would open up another door. I became vegetarian because I thought at the time that was the epitome of being healthy. The government very much steers us towards eating a high-grain, low-fat diet. So I thought we're being super healthy by, eating a no-fat, grain-based diet, even too scared to eat an olive because, there's too much fat in it. At first, I felt really, really good and vibrant for the first year or so, primarily because I was just flushing all the toxins out of my system. And, eschewing all the processed foods and just, filling my body with lots of fruit and veg and whole foods. But the problem was it's not sustainable because it wasn't nutrient dense. There wasn't any animal fats in it, not enough quality proteins. And eventually I just, kept breaking down. And I guess the second big wake-up call happened when my little baby boy, who we're also raising as a vegetarian, so I had a vegan pregnancy. My baby boy was vegetarian, and in 11 months he ended up in hospital. And as a mum, that's when, when the shit really hits the fan and your baby's in hospital and you have to start questioning, well, is it the things I'm putting in and on my body or not putting in and on our body that is directly contributing to our health crisis? So that's when I kind of really threw myself into, well, what is health? What are the principal drivers of nutrition? And I came across the works of Dr. Weston A. Price through my beloved naturopath, and I resisted for a whole year. I'm like, not eating animal products because of ethical reasons. And then I just had to, at some point, I raised the white flag when I just saw my little baby boy was not thriving on round and round of antibiotics, and thought there's got to be a better way. And we started introducing nutrient-rich traditional whole foods into our diet for the first time in many years, like pastured meats with the fat, organ meats, including livers and brain, bone broths, wild seafood, pastured eggs, full-fat whole dairy, fermented foods and drinks, along with, fruit and veg and activated nuts. And within a matter of months, if not weeks, we went from barely surviving to thriving. And that's when I thought, oh my gosh, all this simply from changing our diet. And that's when it really hit home just how powerful food can be as medicine. And that kind of became my catch cry, food is the most powerful medicine available to us. And at that time in Sydney, 15 odd years ago, of course, no one was making and selling all this food. So I had no choice but to get back into the kitchen myself and make it, because nobody else was doing it. And out of desperation, I just, I think the only book back then was Sally Fallon's Nourishing Traditions, which I adore, but of course it's all in ounces and really, quite lengthy, unwieldy recipes. So my my craft, particularly in my days as a corporate lawyer, is really deducing information down really, really simply, stripping it back. So I started crafting my own super simple recipes, making these products myself for my own family, for no other reason, just to heal ourselves. All our medical issues, one by one, miraculously started disappearing. And then friends were like, okay, can you just make a little bit extra for me? And then friends of friends came knocking at the door, and the circle just kept expanding and expanding just through word of mouth. And there was a point where I just stood in my kitchen one day and I went, oh, crap. I can't see myself returning back as a corporate lawyer. This is what I'm destined to do. So I started just making and selling products from home. It all just started in the kitchen, in my garage, with my, babies around my ankles. And then the cooking classes started because women approached me saying, well, what's so special about this food? Can you teach us how to make it? And I felt that it was my duty, my passion, my honor, my obligation to teach these women how to make this food themselves in their own home. And then I just kept getting asked so many questions about what do we eat, where do we get it from, macronutrient ratios, like everything under the sun. And then that's when the health coaching sessions started, purely self-taught. I didn't want to go back and learn the, conventional food pyramid, because I knew I would just like throw the book at the lecturer, and back, 15 years ago, that's all that was really taught. So I started kind of packaging together all my personal knowledge and experience, over the years, and sat down with people and teach them what I call the fundamentals of robust nutrition in one-on-one health coaching sessions. And then from there, public speaking. So now I do more group events. I still do some one-on-ones. A lot of my cooking classes are now online for people that, are not based in Sydney. And then, one mother's helper ended up turning into 16 over the years, helping me make all this food from my home. And then eventually, after 16 people in my home, the universe gave me a bit of a shove, and I had no choice but to open up a bricks and mortar retail store, which I call Broth Bar and Larder, which is the home of Star Anise Organic Whole Foods. And that's where we make and sell all our beautiful artisan organic whole food products on site. And then I guess from there, I just started becoming passionate about, well, it's not only, the food that we eat that really dictates our health. It's also what we put in on top of our bodies, on our skin, and what we're breathing into our home. And it just kind of made no sense to me that I could see so many of my customers and clients being so meticulous about the food they were eating. They'd go home and they'd be, spraying all the artificial perfumes and conventional personal care products and cleaning products onto them, and that just made no sense to me. So then I started helping them swap out all the chemicals in their home too, one by one. And I just call it healthy swapping. So it's not a matter of depriving yourself from anything. People often think that, going down a healthy path means they're going to be leading this really boring, life of deprivation, and nothing could be further from the truth. Your life ends up becoming more rich and wonderful and vibrant and colourful when you just kick all the toxins and you can actually think clearly, and you become happier and the brain fog goes. So it's just a matter of what I call healthy swapping. So whatever you're currently using that is, not so great, I just help people to healthy swap it to a more nourishing, less toxic version. So I guess my mission grew from simply bringing nutrient-dense traditional whole foods back to the modern table to more broadly than that, to helping people lead a less toxic, more nourishing life in all areas of their life, starting with their home, because I believe that vibrant health starts in the home. Starts with the products that you buy, that you're cooking and eating. It's starting with what you're putting onto your skin. It's starting with, what you're spraying around the house. So that's a long answer to your question.
But it's so perfect and so true. It's the first thing that I coach my clients with. We need to create the environment for change. If you're living in a house where you've got processed and packaged foods in the cupboard, you're going to eat it. So, but it's not about getting rid of stuff like that. It's about swapping it with healthy swaps. So we're not living a life of deprivation. We're actually enjoying ourselves. And I actually love your if you become one of Soulla's members, you can get her manual. It's like a whole year of how you swap everything out of your house gradually and cost effectively, which I love as well. But let's start with the kitchen, Soulla, because I think the biggest challenge I get when I get a new client, or you probably feel the same way, is they're like, I don't even cook, right? So, or I've got clients that have got so much stuff in their kitchen, they can't cook because the clutter is just out of control.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you guys watch Soulla on Instagram cook, it is so simple, like the most simple ingredients, and also really simple utensils and products and pans and stuff. Like, we don't need a lot of fancy things, and we don't need a lot of ingredients either, I think. So I really wanted to start with you today, Soulla, because you are this amazing expert cook. And, you know, for those of you who haven't worked with me yet, you'll know that if you are really struggling in the beginning and you're just like, I just can't cook, then I send you to Soulla for her cooking that you can pick up from her beautiful business to get you started. So she's the only one that I trust in Sydney to cook food for my clients, because I know the ingredients are so absolutely pure and amazing. What would be your way to start someone's pantry and kitchen off, Soulla?
Yeah, so the food industry has us believing that cooking from home is difficult, it's expensive, it's inconvenient, and hence, you know, steering us towards the fast food buying out. But nothing could be further from the truth. So my nutritional philosophy is that we should be eating nutrient-rich food, so buying nutrient-rich, predominantly single-ingredient food that are ethically sourced and minimally processed, so as unprocessed as possible. Then you bring them home, and there are certain rules with certain foods in terms of how you properly prepare them, which I handhold people through so that food, you can maximise its nutrient density and minimise anti-nutrients, and with as few ingredients as possible and few steps as possible, and it's got to taste ridiculously delicious. So if something is, you know, nutrient dense, it's ethically sourced, unprocessed, minimal steps, and it tastes delicious, then really what more do you want? The first thing is kind of really, I coach people in my Food as Medicine talks and one-on-one health coaching, is really for them to really understand and internalize what it is that we are biologically designed to eat, and to get that really clear and to understand why our body thrives on that. So, you know, your pastured animal products, chemical-free veggies, lacto-fermented foods, you know, your pastured eggs, whole dairy, if you can tolerate it, you know, small amounts of activated nuts, you know, your beautiful, herbs and spices, unrefined salt. So just really understanding the basics of what we are and are not biologically designed to eat, and really educating people around, you know, what we're not biologically designed to eat embraces, you know, your refined grains. And that takes a lot for people to, you know, because grains are really pushed. I think it's, you know, the bottom of the food pyramid. It's meant to be like the bulk of what we're eating. So when I say to people, you know, we're not really biologically designed to eat much, if any, grains, you know, and that's kind of the basis of their diet. They'd be having like cereal or toast for breakfast, pasta, you know, or, you know, sandwich for lunch and pasta for dinner. It's kind of like, well, what else is there? So really kind of that understanding is foundational. And then from there, I gift people really simple meal plans, which is basically a formula. So my brain from, you know, my days as a corporate lawyer works in terms of formulas. So I devise these formulas, what to have for breakfast, lunch and dinner. And they're really super simple. You know, so your breakfast revolves around, for example, eggs with leafy greens and some sauerkraut and maybe a smoothie if you can tolerate that. You know, lunch is basically leftovers or vegetables with quality protein, and dinner, my mantra is meat, 3 veg plus broth. So once you've got those formulas, then knowing what to buy is simple, because you're just plugging in, you know, to fulfill the formulas. And then it doesn't, to prevent taste fatigue, you're swapping the things within the formula. So if you take dinner, meat, 3 veg plus broth, you know, every night you'll have a different type of meat, you know, different cut of meat, different way of cooking the meat. You're alternating the vegetables, you know, and then the broth, you know, you might alternate between chicken broth, beef broth, fish broth, you know, so you're not getting bored of it. You're not having the same thing every day. You want variety. You know, our body thrives on variety. You know, we want to keep it on its toes and have a full plethora of variety within the foods that we are biologically designed to eat. So, you know, handing people, you know, fact sheets on, you know, what I call pantry, fridge, freezer staples. There's not really much there. People come into my house and like, where's your pantry? It's like, well, I don't have a pantry because the vast bulk of our food is fresh food. It's what's in the fridge. And really teaching people to, shop at farmers markets or shop at organic stores, because it forces you to buy what is in season. And at first people think, oh my God, I don't have this variety of 100 different, fruits and vegetables. I've only got a smaller amount. But the fact is, we're not designed to eat stone fruit in watermelon in the middle of winter. So it kind of forces you to respect Mother Nature and get into the rhythms of Mother Nature. And people, the comments I get are, oh my God, as you said before, Leila, this food is really simple. The ingredients are simple. The steps are really simple. I question everything, every kind of thought, rule, dogma, principle I had growing up has been, turned upside down, inside out, on its head a million times in my life. So when I look at, a recipe, I'll go, is that really necessary? And I really question it. So I strip things down really, really simply. My mantra is you should be able to be in and out of the kitchen in 10 minutes. If it's taking you really more than 10 minutes to make something, as a general rule, it's like questioning, what are you doing? So I love cooking. I love real food. I love sharing what I know, but I don't want to be in the kitchen all day long. I want to be kind of in and out, and then teaching my clients to have, 2 to 3 good square meals a day, because we're designed to be hunter-gatherers and not snackers. And I remember as a vegetarian, because, the food isn't as nutrient dense and you're just constantly snacking and grazing all day. I was just like constantly had to revolve my day around where I was going to be every 2 hours, because I knew I had to eat, And so now I just prepare 2 to 3 square meals a day. And in between, I don't think about food. I'm not obsessing about it, stressing about it. It's just, I think it's getting yourself into a rhythm, just like anything. Like at first you might feel, oh my God, this is just like a whole new language that I have to, navigate. For me, going from a hardcore macrobiotic, vegetarian, vegan, a grain-based diet, grains and legumes, to then a traditional whole foods or ancestral diet, real food diet, did involve at first a bit of okay, I've got to reprogram how I do things. Now there's so many books, resources. I lay everything out for people on a silver platter. And once you know what we're designed to eat, once you've got your meal formulas, once you know the due diligence questions to ask when you're buying food. So at first people just wanted to know, where do you buy your meat? Where do you buy your veggies? And I'd be giving them a list of shops, which is only helpful if you live in the same city as me. Okay. And it's not really helpful if that shop closes down. So what I'm now moving towards is educating people on the due diligence questions to ask when buying things. And I get that from my corporate lawyer days, before you buy, a company or before people buy a house or a car, we do so much due diligence and we know the questions to ask, when we're buying a car or a house. If people spent that same amount of energy and time in what they were putting in and on our body, there'd be a completely different healthcare system. So getting people to understand, well, what am I going to ask when I go to a farmer's market in terms of, what I'm buying? So once you know what to ask, we're designed to eat, not designed to eat, you know what we're going to have for breakfast, lunch and dinner as a general rule, what to ask when you go and sourcing that food, it's actually quite simple. And it's going to be even more simple when I get my cookbook out at some point, because then everything will be laid out. But in the meantime, come to a food as medicine talk or a one-on-one health coaching session, or just, I've got a number of online cooking classes. Follow my Instagram page and stories. You'll learn so much there and realize how simple it can be.
So much there, so much. And I think that's what people really need to get confident with. You're right, is asking people where their food comes from. Like I was at the farmer's market and one of the growers there that we were actually buying from for a while had organic certification. And this is where you need to ask questions, right, guys? Because this guy had organic certification. We were buying him from him for a while. And after a while, I started thinking, he still has Brussels sprouts, but they're not in season at the moment. And after doing some investigating, he was Brussels sprout in season a certain time of the year. So it was a huge wake-up call for me to remember not to take things for granted and do your research and do your investigation. So things like you said, knowing what's in season. We're not supposed to eat watermelon all year. It's a seasonal fruit. That'll start giving some indications. But also, like, what I like about my butcher is he can tell me exactly which farm his animal came from, how old it was, where the other half is. He said to me the other day, I've got half, the other half's at Victor Churchill, being that transparent with their products and how they are and where they come from. And he even said to me the other day, "Oh, this is cut at an abattoir. The offals come from an abattoir where they have non-organic meat, so I can't guarantee this one." So he actually said, "I'm going to throw it out or just give it to people for their dogs because I actually can't guarantee if it's organic." And so transparency like that is so important.
Absolutely. I often talk about provenance, getting people to understand where did their food come from and what's been done to it, and forging those beautiful relationships like you've just discussed with your butcher. Like, you think about it, we used to live in close, tight-knit tribes, so we knew exactly, where things were coming from. A lot of our stuff was grown ourselves, so we knew exactly. Now we're just so far removed from that process, and as you become further and further removed from the source of what you're eating, it's incumbent upon us just to ask more questions. And most people don't. Most people are, I don't want to use the word ignorant, but they just assume that simply because it's allowed to be sold, surely it must be good for you. And honestly, who can blame them? I'd love to live in a world where we don't have to ask. Whatever is, sold on the shelf, whether it's food, personal care products, cleaning product, makeup, whatever it is, we just can assume that it's safe. And this is the mentality that most people operate under, and the mentality that, bless my poor mum, she used to operate under. So she used to bring stuff in the house and she would be like, "Soulla, surely if it's allowed to be sold, it's got to be safe." And it was a dark day for me when I realised that is a myth, and then that I had to shatter that. And it behooves us as individuals, as conscious consumers, that sadly we have to make our own due diligence. We've got to do our own due diligence and ask those questions, because if we don't do it, nobody else will.
No, and then if we don't do that due diligence and start voting with our dollar about where we spend, what we buy, then we're not going to have change. People are going to be kept being deceived by all those organisations that are trying to deceive us. I think too, I found it really interesting during the pandemic that how much that became heightened, because all of a sudden people couldn't shop every day.
Yeah.
Did you notice that? I found that so fascinating, and it was a real study in psychology for me about how people buy food and what they eat, the pandemic. And so I realised that, most people shop every day, so they don't plan, so they just go to the supermarket. And supermarkets only really cater for everyday shopping, and that's why when people were going to bulk buy, they were running out of stock, right? And so we live in this fast-paced world, and there were a amount of people in my street that were saying, "What do you mean I have to cook now? I don't cook.
Yeah,
I don't cook every day." And then after a few weeks, and this is no judgment on anyone at all, it's just in my observation of what's happening, and what Soulla and I would say is one of the pinnacle things of our health crisis is that all of a sudden they were getting so many cooking services, meals delivered. And so let's just talk about one of the biggest problems of takeout food. Even if it's stir-fried vegetables and meat, which most people would think would be really healthy. Let's talk about this is the biggest difference in your business is the oils that we use. Let's talk about oils, Soulla.
Yes. So while everyone's quitting sugar, which I applaud, while, the word gluten-free is becoming more trendy, which I, applaud that we should be minimizing our gluten, no one really is talking about what I call public enemy number one, and that is industrial seed oils. The world still hasn't really caught up with that I think the biggest nutritional killer are your processed oils, your canola, your cottonseed, your corn oil, soybean oil, safflower, sunflower oil, all of those oils which are made from an extremely industrialized processed. And even though they're called vegetable oils, it's really clever marketing. They're not actually made from vegetables. They're made from the oil of seeds. But here's the thing. Seeds don't want to give up their oil. So to give up their oil, mankind has been forced to use high pressure, high temperature and chemical solvents to try and extract the oil from the seeds, but that process makes those oils rancid. And then we take these rancid oils home, and they're not heat stable, and then we cook them, and the molecules then, fall apart even more, causing more rancidity. And they are, in a word, toxic to the human body. They cause inflammation of the body, and we know that inflammation is the root cause of all modern disease, whatever you want to label that disease, whether it's cancer, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. So there's no nutritive value whatsoever in these oils. They are particularly damaging to pregnant women and children. And the sad news is they are ubiquitous. They are used everywhere, like all fast food industries, even your most expensive restaurants, bar literally I can count on one hand the number that don't in Sydney. And the reason why they use it is because they're cheap. So my parents are migrants. They came out to Australia from Cyprus in the 1950s, and in the milk bars and delicatessens and fish shops, they were all back then using beef tallow, butter, olive oil, all this, the stuff, the fats that our great-grandparents used to eat. And then there was a directive in the 1950s by the government saying that these traditional fats are shown to be bad for health, for cardiovascular disease. They've got to swap to canola, cottonseed, Crisco, And since then, look at what has happened to chronic illness and degenerative disease. Look what's happened to cancer, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. It's skyrocketed, in line with the use of these industrial seed oils. I think the science is really clear now that these seed oils are dangerous to health, that the proponent of them, Ansel Keys in the 1950s, that really pushed this on the basis of his diet heart hypothesis, was seriously flawed. It was discredited by the medical and the scientific community at the time as a complete nonsense. It should never have gotten out into mainstream media. But for the vegetable oil industry, which was in its infancy at the time, cottoned onto the work of Ansel Keys and thought, great, we can make this guy our poster boy. We'll land him a cover of Time magazine, and we'll convince the public that the traditional fats that we've been, using for millennia are dangerous, and that we should swap to these industrialized processed oils and margarine. And sadly, that has caused the biggest health scam that the world has ever seen. And more people are now coming out saying that, we've got to go back to eating these traditional fats. But sadly, these seed oils are still so ubiquitously used, and the government hasn't really come out and, said we need to stop using them. They're kind of, tiptoeing very slowly around the issue, probably, fear of, the retribution that would be involved. But it is really sad because, as you said, you go to restaurants going, okay, I'm just going to have meat and veg. How could I go wrong with that? But for the fact that it's just marinated or coated in these seed oils, which makes eating out quite a difficult process. And you have to then, once again, do your due diligence on the restaurants. And that's what I teach, my customers and my clients. I say to them, right, when you eat at these restaurants, or basically say to them, can you please cook my meal in butter or olive oil or coconut oil, because I have an intolerance, or whatever word you want to use too, and then you start listing them: canola, cottonseed, vegetable oil, so on and so forth. I've found the vast majority of restaurants are very accommodating, to their credit. And the more and more people that ask, the more that we can affect change. Okay, it's not going to happen until we, the consumers, keep asking questions and saying, no, I don't want that. Okay, but until that happens, restaurants and fast food stores and food manufacturers are just going to keep using these seed oils. And Broth Bar and Larder is really an extension of my kitchen. I get my food from them. I would not, put anything in there that I and my children wouldn't eat. So that's my quality assurance is, it's got to be good enough for my kids and I, otherwise I'm not going to sell it, because that's where we eat. So that's why I think, it's been one of the, the reasons for, the ongoing success of, I don't really like using that word, but I guess people appreciate that my quality standards, and appreciate that I will never cut corners. And it's really an education campaign. The more and more people who are aware of the dangers of seed oils, the more that we can really affect change.
I think that is such a good summary, because I think what people have got confused about is everyone thought that sugar was the bad thing. Now, anything out of balance is bad, but I don't even like using that word, but you know what I mean. But what is actually in all those processed foods is refined sugar, but it's actually all these seed oils, things like soy oil, and all of them are getting genetically modified now as well. So they were rancid in the first place, but now they're genetically modified as well, and it's all in our food. And I think it's probably not going to change too much in the near future, because it's so political and economically driven, right? Like, in Australia, we grow cotton, and cottonseed oil is like, if I walk down the shops, at the back of all the shops, there are tins and tins
and drums of it.
Oh my God. And you're just like, oh my God, I can't, people.
Even the most fancy, expensive restaurants are coming in with these drums of canola oil. And they stay in our cells for a number of years. Our body doesn't really recognize it as food, and they stay in our cells. They clog up the receptor sites of our cells. And while gluten and sugar are also toxins, at least the body can kind of recognize them to a degree and eliminate them a lot quicker. So that's why my public enemy number one is the seed oils over and above the refined sugar and the refined gluten. Of course, if you're a celiac of diabetes, then obviously, the refined sugar and the refined starches are probably equally as problematic. But for the average person, first thing I get people to do before they're, quitting sugar and, quitting refined starches is, number one, get rid of the seed oils. And I say to them, do you have any of these in your house? Throw them out. No safe level of consumption. So that's, when you're eating out, and eating out is nice. We get a lot of, beautiful, psychological and emotional nourishment by sharing a meal with others. So we don't want to not eat out. We don't want to live a life where, we feel that, the stress of eating out is going to, that we can't eat out ever again. But it's just like maybe choosing the restaurant or calling up ahead of time and saying, hey, can you accommodate this for me? And as I said, most restaurants are down with that. Obviously, fast food chains are not, but that's one where I just say to people, and I say to my kids, just don't eat there. It's not real food. I don't even consider it as food. So for me, it's just, and same with anything kind of like packaged. You've got to start reading the labels. And when I say read the labels on all packaged food, I just ignore all the marketing fluff on the front. I ignore the nutritional panel. And I just get people to read the words that come after the word ingredients. That's all you've got to be concerned about. And then as a really general rule of thumb, if your great-great-grandmother didn't recognize it, then it just don't touch it. It's don't eat it, And another really general good rule of thumb, something needs to be advertised, it's probably not real food.
That is so true. So let's talk about what oils we should have in our pantry, because I think everyone who's listening, if you're not in my and Soulla's circles or in the wellness circle, you might be going, oh my God, I've got canola oil in my cupboard. So let's give people a swap straight away to go to their pantry.
Okay, so healthy fats are all the fats that your great-great-grandmother would have used. So butter, from pastured animals. When I say pastured animals, grass-fed cows, or ghee if you can't tolerate the casein and the lactose in butter. Ghee is a wonderful, beautiful, nourishing alternative. Beef tallow. Now, beef tallow is the fat that rises to the top when you make your bone broth. There'll be this beautiful layer of fat on the top, and we just kind of skim that off or pick that off and just stick it in the freezer. It lives in the freezer, goes straight from the freezer to the frying pan. If you don't make your own beef broth, then we sell tallow cubes individually at Broth Bar and Larder. You can buy them online and just simply melt down a cube at a time. Your great-grandmother also would have used duck fat, pork lard, coconut oil. And then I use extra virgin cold pressed olive oil as a finishing oil on top of veggies, raw or cooked veggies, as opposed to really cooking with olive oil, because olive oil is a monounsaturated fat, which means that there's one place in the molecular chain where oxygen can muscle in and cause the molecule to fall apart. So it's not as heat stable as your saturated fats, as your butter and beef tallow and duck fat and pork lard and coconut oil. They're saturated with hydrogen atoms so that they're really stable, so there's less chance of oxygen kind of muscling in and causing the molecule to fall apart. So I tend to cook my meat with beef tallow because it comes from the animal you're cooking, so it's perfect. I tend to cook veggies or fish with butter. And if I'm doing like an Asian or a Indian curry, I'll tend to use coconut oil. And then, as I said, I tend to use my olive oil cold as a finishing oil on top. So they're basically the fats that you should have in your pantry or your fridge or freezer.
And I think a good rule of thumb is to stick to if when it's at room temperature, it's not a solid mass, then you should not cook with it. And that's the easiest way to remember to single out the olive oil, right? Because olive oil is always a liquid.
Yeah. And you also got to be careful. There's a lot of greenwashing going on here, where a lot of organic brands will have, say, for example, goat's curd or feta, supposedly marinating in olive oil, and then when you read the ingredients, it also contains canola oil. And the reason why they put canola oil in there is because olive oil will go really cloudy in the fridge, and that doesn't look good. Whereas canola oil will be clear. So they'll just put like a dash of olive oil in there, and the bulk of it will be canola oil, and then they put it on the label, marinating in olive oil. So this is the reason why there is no excuse to reading the labels. You've got to keep reading the labels. Even if it says organic plastered all over it, you still have to read the labels.
Absolutely, because you can have organic meat that's been fed organic grain, for instance. And we don't want to eat animals that eat grains.
Yeah, so it's not about so much the presence of the organic certification. It comes down to saying, is this grown and reared the way nature intended? Because a lot of things I buy that are not certified organic because the farmer or the supplier hasn't gone to the trouble and expense of getting that certification. And conversely, there's a lot of things that are certified organic that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. So you always have to go back and go, is this grown and reared the way nature intended? You know, you ask your due diligence questions, you read the label if it comes in a package.
Yeah, perfect. So the two things that I want to ask you about cooking wise, so that's the number one thing I would get everyone to swap out of their pantry as soon as they get off this podcast, is throw all those oils in the bin. Don't even go, I'm going to finish them because, I don't want to waste money. Just throw them in the bin. Get rid of them. And I think like Soulla and I are very much the same. I don't have a very big pantry because there's nothing in there. I have lots of herbs and spices. I'm come from a Sri Lankan and Indian background, so we have a lot of spices. But apart from that, people are the same. They come to my house like, where are your sauces and oils? And so, no, I just make all that stuff as I go. But the big thing that you make that I send people the most customers to you for is two of the most important, both metabolic and nutrient dense foods, and that is broth, which everyone should be having every single day. And I actually have multiple cups of broth a day, and there's reasons for that. And organ meats, which everyone should be having a very good serving of every week, and menstruating women should be having an double serving in their week leading up to menses. Let's talk about broth, and you have two amazing classes in your website that people can do online with your cooking classes, one about broths and one about organ meats. Mm-hmm. Yep. Let's talk about the basics of broth because it's so easy. Broth is so easy.
It's just literally bones, but well sourced, so pastured bones, filtered water. So really one big thing I get people to do is swap out tap water with filtered water, so getting a good water filter. And I have a company that I recommend, so we can give details to that if you would like. And some organic herbs and spices. You can chuck in some veggies if you want, but you don't have to. We don't at Broth Bar because a lot of our clientele can't have certain vegetables, so we just make it as allergenic free as possible. I provide all the ratios, so getting the quantity of the water and the bones and the salt and all that just right. So benefits of bone broth. A few reasons. Number one is collagen. So collagen is the glue that holds the bones of animals and humans together. So bone broth is really important for building, maintaining and repairing your osteoskeletal system. That's what collagen does. So joints, cartilage, ligaments, tendons, bones, muscles, and particularly for children whose bones and osteoskeletal system is growing, for pregnant women who are growing a mini human inside of them. Our collagen starts diminishing after the age of 25 and diminishes rapidly as older that we get. So collagen really is, for me, bone broth really was my savior in terms of eliminating all my osteoskeletal issues. So my big health issue was osteoskeletal. So people have, different things. A lot of people, come to me with digestive issues or lack of period or this or that. For me, I kept breaking bones. I had tight ropey muscles. I had bi-weekly osteo appointments. I had creaky joints. And I just thought, well, that's just my lot in life. And I didn't realize it wasn't until I started consuming 1 cup of bone broth a day that all my osteoskeletal issues vanished. And I've had the same osteo for like 20 years. It's like treating a different body. I don't have to go see him anymore. Collagen isn't just found all throughout our osteoskeletal system. It's also found, it's a primary structural building block in our hair, skin and nails. So this is why I coined the phrase about 15 years ago, bone broth is my Botox. Because people kept saying to me, you've got such amazing skin, what do you use? Do you see a plastic surgeon? What do you put on your skin? It's like, primarily just have a lot of bone broth, So that's what collagen does, osteoskeletal and hair, skin and nails. Then when you cook collagen, it breaks down into gelatin. Gelatin is gut healing and sealing. It provides a beautiful mucosal layer on the gut, and given that gut issues are becoming more and more prevalent in society today, it's becoming more and more important that people start healing and sealing their gut, and the number one food for that is broth. Okay. And then one of the essential amino acids in gelatin is called glycine. Glycine is really important because it balances out our muscle meat intake, and there's a whole body of science around that, which I won't go into, but I do go into it in my bone broth workshop, basically saying if we eat muscle meat, and there's nothing wrong with that, I think we're biologically designed to eat muscle meat, it's incumbent upon us to team the muscle meat, though, with a glycine-rich food. Where's glycine found? The bones of animals. Okay, so in the West, unless you're vegetarian, we tend to eat abundant quantities of methionine-rich muscle meat, but glycine glycine-rich foods like bone broth have really fallen by the wayside, and you get this imbalance. Okay, so that's why having the broth balances out our muscle meat, methionine-rich muscle meat intake, so that our body is balanced. Okay, and glycine is also really important to help the liver detoxify. Now, given the ubiquitous toxicity of our modern-day environment, I think it's now more important than ever in the history of mankind that we avail ourselves of detoxifying foods like bone broth to assist the liver in its near constant detoxification task. So for all these reasons, as you said, 1 cup of bone broth a day. If you've got gut issues or osteoskeletal issues, you can increase it. There's always exceptions to the rule, which, you can work with an integrative practitioner. But that's our general rule, and that's my, why my dinner mantra is meat, 3 veg plus broth. Okay, and they all come together in a soup. That all comes together in a casserole or a curry. So whatever we're having, it's always going to be some variation of meat, 3 veg plus broth. We just tend to have a cup of chicken or beef broth with a good squeeze of lemon juice. You can add what we call other flavour bombs that we call them at broth bars. Things like, minced ginger, garlic, tamari, red boat fish sauce. You can add in, food grade essential oil. These beautiful flavour bombs that, add a lot of nutrients and flavour, or you can just have it straight up with your dinner meal. So that's the benefit of broth.
And it's a really good way. So with my clients, if I'm working with clients that have thyroid issues or metabolic issues, I often get them to have quite a lot of broth, like nearly with every meal, because of that exact reason that Soulla said the glycine helps with the muscle meats. And so some people digestively challenged can't break meat down properly, so they need them hand in hand for quite a long time. So keeping that higher than their fat count. So that's another good trick for everybody. But broth is so easy, and I've got a question for you, Soulla. So all my clients say, do I have to brown? We were talking before about taking all the hard steps out of recipes. So if you're like Soulla and myself and you've been cooking for years and years, like I'm good Sri Lankan Indian girl, so I've been cooking since I was able to reach the stove. But you start to learn all the things that are fluff and all the things that are necessary. And I think this is a big barrier for people that cook. I've got to brown the bones and put them in the oven, do all the Let's talk about. That's just make it simple.
To do that, just keep it really simple. The only reason why historically people brown the bones is for flavour. It doesn't add any nutrition to it. Browning takes importance if you're cooking something for a shorter period of time. So because we are advocates of long, slow cooking, we're making a bone broth overnight. So, 8 to 15 hours, it's already going to be so nutritious and flavoursome enough just from that long, slow cooking process that any additional flavour benefits you're going to get from browning is going to be so minimal as it's not going to be worth it. Now, I could see the benefits of browning if you were only, like a restaurant is only going to, for example, they choose to only make a broth for 2 hours, or they're going to make a casserole or a stew for 2 hours. Then browning the meat, browning the bones takes on more importance. That's why my mum always did that, because she couldn't fathom the idea of me leaving something on the stove or in the oven overnight for 10, 12, 15, 24 hours. She's like, oh my God, how could you do that? Whereas for me, it's kind of like easy. And the other thing you've got to understand is like 10, 15, 24 hours of slow cooking doesn't mean it's 10, 15, 24 hours of effort. It's literally a few minutes of effort to reap the rewards of that flavour that's generated from 10, 15, 24 hours of cooking. So, when people say, 24-hour cook, they think, oh my God, that's so much work. And it's like, it is so easy. I'm having friends over for dinner tonight. It literally took me single-digit minutes to rub some spices over a lamb shoulder and bang it in the oven for, 6 odd hours. And we're going to have this beautiful lamb that's just, the meat's just going to fall off the bone. And everyone's going to go, oh my God, this must have taken you hours. And it's like really embarrassing at dinner parties. It's like, really only took me a few minutes. And then I threw a salad together, and that's only a few minutes. So this whole dinner party really took me some total of 10 minutes. And people just don't believe it. So, it's particularly coming from a vegetarian background where, I felt that I spent all day in the kitchen because you got to soak the grains and the legumes and combine them, and, you're chopping up so much vegetable matter. Whereas now, traditional whole foods cooking or ancestral diet, paleo diet, real foods diet, whatever you call it, I just call it a real foods diet basically, is just so quick and simple. And I really question each of the steps. So when I got, whatever recipe I started with, like today, I just use all my own recipes. But back, 10, 15, 20 years ago, I'd worked from a cookbook. I really kind of looked at them and go, well, do I need to do that? Even things like, do I really need to add the veggies into the broth, or can I get away with not doing that if I don't have any? Do I really need to add the vinegar into the broth? Because when you're doing things also as a business, you've got to question, it's costing money to do each of those things. So I found a scientific study that showed when they added vinegar to the bone broth, it didn't actually extract any minerals from the bone. So we skipped that step. So basically, we just stripped down this broth recipe to literally filtered water, quality bones, organic herbs and spices in a particular ratio, and then, it takes a few minutes to throw it together, forget about it literally, overnight, and then you just strain it and add salt in a particular ratio when you strain it, and you're done. And I always recommend do it in big batches, so you're not have to doing it every week. Get the biggest pot that you can lift. Most people can lift 20 kilos, so get a 20-litre pot, and then, make it, once a month, or however many people are in your family. You'll have to do the maths on that. So you're not making it, every single day. It's just kind of like going to be a once a fortnight or once a month thing. And of course, there's going to be times where, if you don't have the time, energy and bandwidth to make it, you can buy it. There's so many places now that do sell bone broth. 15 years ago on the market, I was the only one. I was the only kombucha manufacturer. I was only a beet kvass. I was the only activated nuts, only manufacturer of raw treats that didn't have agave syrup in them or raw sugar. But now it's a wonderful thing. There's so many supplies. There's really no excuse in this day and age, unless you live in a really remote town. If you live in a metropolitan city, there's really no excuse. You should be able to access quality food. Either make it yourself or find somewhere that you can access it from.
So right. Then bone broth has probably got to be my biggest add to people, even to just do it once a week, like you said, in a big pot and put it in the fridge or freezer.
Yeah.
The second, the next one I wanted to ask you about was organ meats. People we went on a thing where we thought organ meats were so bad for us, and hopefully more people are coming around. And I like to make fun of my husband because he still thinks they taste funny, but that's also a mindset to get over. Tell us about organ meats.
Yeah.
You do really cool things with organ meats, and you have a whole course on how to cook organ meats. Let's talk about organ meats.
How to sneak them into family-friendly meals or present them loud and proud. So organ meats are the most nutrient-dense food on the planet, bar none. So gram for gram, they've got more, the highest nutrient density than any other food on the planet. The reason why we bang on and on about nutrient-dense food or nutrient-rich food is because all of the systems, structure, and functions of the human body are built from and run on one thing and one thing only, and that is nutrients. So from our digestive system, endocrine system, immune system, nervous system, musculoskeletal system, reproductive system, skin health, brain health, the whole kit and caboodle is built from and runs on nutrients. So therefore, our nutritional paradigm should all be about focusing on nutrient-rich foods. What is the most nutrient-dense food on the planet? Organ meats. And of course, we're talking about organ meats from pastured sources. Once again, it all comes down to back to provenance, so source and processing. So of course, we're talking about not industrial feedlot and confinement, but from animals that are roaming free on pasture in sunshine, eating what they're biologically designed to eat. Okay, so organ meats are really, really high in iron. They're really, really high in all your B group vitamins, particularly your folate. Now, ponder that if you're pregnant or wish to become pregnant. The highest food source of folate is livers. Okay, so with my second pregnancy, what I call my Western A Price baby, I just decided I'm not going to take a single supplement. I'm going to just do baby unplugged, and food is going to be my medicine. She came out the most healthy, highest red blood cell count doctor had ever seen. He's like, what are you eating? I said, all the stuff you tell pregnant women not to eat. Like your raw dairy, your oysters, your livers. And he just said, okay, don't tell me that. Just keep doing what you're doing. They're really high in vitamin A, D, and K2. Now, vitamin A is the concert master of fetal development. And by that, I mean vitamin A is responsible for giving babies that beautiful, broad face, high cheekbones, wide dental arch so that their teeth are perfectly formed. And it's just not a matter of wanting a beautiful, aesthetically looking baby. Function follows form. So if you're well formed, our faces are meant to be as wide as they are long, and few of us really fit that criteria other than supermodels, which is why they paid a squillion, but that's how we all should be looking, really. You can then breathe better. You don't have to have teeth removed. You can chew better. You can sleep better. So there's all these physiological advantages of having a face that is well structured and well formed. And there's so many studies done now, both in animal subjects in particular, where if you deprive someone of vitamin A, like Pottinger did in his famous cat experiments, where he took two groups of cats, and fed one group of cat foods biologically designed to eat, and the other group of cat processed foods, and he procreated them over 10 generations, and he just saw what happened. When you feed a species the food that it's biologically designed to eat, for generation after generation after generation, produce really healthy, species. When you feed a species food it's not biologically designed to eat, disease and illness follows, and it just gets exacerbated and exacerbated and exacerbated with each generation as the health bank account gets usurped and gets used up, because you're passing on a lower health bank account to the next generation, and they're not like replenishing it by making good investments. They're just constantly making withdrawals, and at some point you're going to crash and burn and go into the red, and that's where, infertility, depression, and all that happens. So, we're saying now we're seventh generation Pottinger cats. And it's due to the fact that we are nutritionally devoid. Our diets are so nutritionally devoid. So our imperative as a species, if we're going to, not only thrive, but just basically survive, is to start incorporating this nutrient-rich food back into our diet, including, these odd bits that our great-grandparents, used to eat, the bones, the organs, the fat of the animals. Now, organ meats, have a lot of ick factor around them, and that's just purely cultural. Like if you go to countries like France, organ meats are everywhere, even in the most touristy cafes. Every supermarket will sell organ meats. People just get it. There's pâtés, there's terrines, the French love their sweetbreads. Like, it's just normal. But somewhere along the line in other Western countries, organ meats kind of were relegated to the, the yucky ick factor. And I see that in my kids, up until they went to school, they'd happily eat livers and lamb's brains and, black pudding and, all these organ meats. And then something weird happened when they went to school. I don't know what it is, but they'd come home and then I'd say, this is what we're cooking for dinner, and their noses would turn up. And then, you have to try and then sneak them in. So, lamb's brains now, instead of being crumbed, in activated buckwheat, I now have to, sneak them into omelettes and just treat them like an egg, blitz them up. Pâté is a really easy, palatable way of incorporating organ meats into your diet. The French really nailed it with that creamy dips. I say to people, just to even have some pâté on a few rounds of sliced apple or cucumber rounds, or celery sticks, or some really quality sourdough or sprouted bread, just as an entree before your main meal. You don't have to start with a big solid block of liver. Just start small and incorporate it. For years I've been shaving raw frozen chicken livers into my smoothies. No one even knows it's there. You can't really taste frozen food. We now sell it in, cube form at Broth Bar and Larder. We do organic beef broth and liver cubes, just, a way of just sneaking it in. So, as you said, Leela, I've got an entire workshop, organ meat workshop, that goes through the nutritional theory about organ meats and how you can really incorporate them into your diet. So, vitamin A, as I said, not only really important for proper formation, it's the number one vitamin for the skin. So when I had, in my early 20s, I laugh when people comment on my skin now, because I think, oh my God, if you saw my skin in my late teens, early 20s, I had the worst case of cystic acne that any dermatologist in Queensland had ever seen. And of course, back then, what does my mum do? She didn't know, takes me to a doctor. They put me on the pill. They give me Roaccutane, and what is Roaccutane? It's mega, mega high doses of synthetic vitamin A with a whole heap of side effects. If the doctor just said, start eating livers, start eating organ meat, start eating chicken liver pâté, there's no side effects, it's a hell of a lot cheaper, and it's natural, because there's an intelligence in food that you will never, ever be able to replicate in a pharmaceutical or a pill, okay? So there's an intelligence in there, and that's what we have to really respect and get back to these, really revere the wisdom of our ancestors. And we need to go back to that, because sometimes I think it is the height of human arrogance to think that we know better than them. And what really excites me is when the science really backs up ancestral wisdom, and then it's fortified by my own personal experience. So, getting organ meats back to the modern table. And it's wonderful to see our pâté at Broth Bar and Larder is just, it's selling. Like, at first people are like, oh, I'm not quite sure about that. But people are buying it. So that's a beautiful thing.
So good. It's slowly changing. And if you work with me and you don't like liver, I always start you off on desiccated liver. So you can because the nutrient benefits from it are something that's very, very essential for every single human being. So all of my clients that refuse to eat organ meats get put on desiccated organ meats. And
it's quite simply, you can get some chicken liver, organic chicken liver, cut it up into pill-sized portions and freeze it.
Exactly.
And crisscross it and just take it like a liver pill, so much cheaper than, a liver supplement. So you can do that. There's so many different ways of getting it into you.
Yeah, and really important, that way, that there's always something that you can do that will fit in your budget, fit in your time schedule. Have a look with Soulla's resources. She has all the answers for that kind of thing.
And the other thing, like livers and bones are so cheap because, compared to your eye fillet, the cost of food is simply a function of economy, supply and demand. Because not that many people are demanding bones and livers. They're still relatively cheap, compared to your muscle meat. So if you're on a budget, I say, great, just eat organ meats. You don't have to have muscle meats. In fact, to our hunter-gatherer ancestors, it was the bones, the fat, and the organs that were the most highly prized part of the animal, the muscle meat was often discarded. So, I often say to people, if a hunter-gatherer walked into a modern-day butcher, they'd be scratching their head going, what the heck are you guys eating? We threw out all this stuff. Where's all the good bits? Where's the bones, the fats, and the organs? And that's why one of my missions in life is to bring these odd bits back to the modern table.
Well, yeah, and animals in the wild always eat out the inside of the animal first as well.
We saw that when we went to Africa, the savannas of Africa. Yeah.
And they know that those are the most nutrient-dense meats, and they're the most metabolic meats as well. So if you actually have trouble with muscle meat, you will be able to digest organ meats much better and much easier. So they're actually a better place to start with if you're returning back to eating meat. I would go broth first and then organ meats and then muscle meats. Let's talk about what are the essentials that you need in terms of cooking, because this is another thing. Like now, Soulla has a Thermomix, and I'm sure everyone's coveting her Thermomix, but I don't want the barrier to entry to cooking to be that you need to have a Thermomix. So let's just, sometimes I actually go into my clients' cupboards and throw appliances out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the essentials.
I was given one, so it's like, if it wasn't for that, I'd be, So the essentials basically are, I think you need a good food processor. So something to chop food up to make it really easy if you're, chopping up large batches of things, or, I used to use my food processor just to make a smoothie instead of a blender. I just had, just use my food processor. To make cakes, I make cakes in food processor. So I use my food processor a lot. I just call my Thermomix, and this would be really offensive I apologize to all the Thermomix consultants out there. I just call my Thermomix a really expensive food processor. The only benefit, or one of the benefits it has, is it does heat at the same time, which your ordinary food processor doesn't heat, but that's okay. I just used to heat things up, on a stove, in a saucepan. So good quality food processor. If you want to grind up things like buckwheat, which is what we call like a pseudo grain, it's a gluten-free grain. So I use that a lot for, biscuits, cakes, muffins, schnitzel, things like that. Then if your Thermomix isn't quite cutting it fine enough, processing it fine enough, that's when I did used to have a separate coffee spice grinder, nut grinder. The advantage of the Thermomix is it does both of those. It does that. It grinds up really finely. And then in addition to that, small quantities, I used to have a stick blender. Like if I wanted to make, tomato sauce, or, blend up a small quantity of something, a stick blender. Now with my Thermomix, or you've got a good food processor, so you don't mind having to wash the whole thing, you can just use that. Saucepans, make sure that they are either cast iron, which is quite heavy, or just stainless steel. And I've done a frying pan blog post, so if you just go to my website and search frying pans, it will come up. I'm not wedded to any particular brand, but I list some of the ones that I use there, and I avoid Teflon and other non-stick surfaces. So Teflon's it's a kind of a double-edged sword, and it came about because of the low-fat movement. So it came about because, when we were told to cut out fat and things were sticking on the frying pan, that's going to be an issue. Whereas I just said to people, just use lots of butter and, coconut oil or beef tallow, the fats we described before, on stainless steel, and then soak it the minute you finish cooking it and scrub it, and it's going to be fine. I have zero issues with cleaning it. So the great thing about stainless steel is it forces you to use more saturated fats. And then when I'm slow cooking in the oven, I just love my beautiful cast iron pots. They're something that, get handed down from generation to generation. You can use a slow cooker. I just prefer, I'm a traditional cook, so I'm going to always, cover and have a bias towards my beautiful, Le Chasseur and Le Creuset cast iron pots. So I have a few of those in different sizes.
I think the slow cooker is a really good one, though, because I recommend it to a lot of people who actually haven't been cooks historically, or if they're out all day and they're worried about leaving their oven on and stuff like that.
So if you don't feel comfortable about leaving a cast iron pot in the oven or on the stove all day or all night, and you feel more comfortable with a slow cooker, great, by all means use that. And that's fine. So the things to look for in a slow cooker, and I cover this in my casseroles workshop or my slow cook workshop, just make sure that the insert is lead free. that's something to look out for, and just get the biggest size you can, so that if you're making a slow cook, just, make a big size so that you can freeze some so you're not having to constantly cook.
And you also don't need ones with any fancy functions. Like I've never used any setting on my slow cooker except low.
Low, exactly. Just low.
Yeah. Low.
Yeah. And just some
no browning, no nothing, like just
really simple.
The most simple, cheap slow cooker.
Measuring cups and spoons, the most basic scale with the less, electronic functions. And that's pretty, and, some good quality knives, and I just get them professionally sharpened every so often. And that's basically it. Some good chopping boards. I have a combination of, I don't actually have plastic ones anymore. They're all wood or marble. It's basically wood. And that's it. And just, some good quality non-toxic dishwashing liquid. And just, obviously what you're using is make sure it's environmentally friendly. So, scourers, the steel wool, those little bits go off into the ocean. The fish eat it. We then eat the fish. So slowly, one by one, just healthy swapping out all your, non and eco-friendly stuff with your eco-friendly stuff. And there's so many beautiful websites out now, so many gorgeous shops. It's a beautiful thing. It's not going to be hard to find eco-friendly places to buy things from.
I think too, when you change over to cooking with more saturated fats and better ingredients, your pots actually get treated by these fats, and they become better. The cookware actually becomes, I don't know, it gets that beautiful used look, and you actually don't need to clean them as much as we think we do. Like the heating of it cleans the pot, so you don't need so many chemicals. I find my kitchen so much cleaner. I mean, it's been a long time since I swapped everything in my home, but let's start with some good healthy swaps to do, because I've actually forgotten, and I think it's really important to know that it can take years to transition.
Absolutely.
To be patient with yourself. Yeah.
And just what it reinforces people, Rome wasn't built in a day. This is a journey. I've been on this journey now for 25 years, started healthy swapping things out one by one. And it doesn't all have to be done immediately. And, once you're, a member in my team, we, as you mentioned before, we map out, a suggested weekly or monthly swapping out schedule so that you don't feel overwhelmed. It's baby steps. And, it's just like, even if you, with your food, I give people I think in my health coaching sessions, it's 36 weeks of healthy swaps. And I'm actually doing an Instagram this year called 52 weeks of healthy swaps. If you just did that one change of, swap a week with your food, swapping margarine to butter, grain-fed meat to grass-fed meat, farmed fish to wild fish, so on and so forth. At first it doesn't feel like you're making much progress, but then you look back over a course of a year or two and go, man, look how far I've come. And then with your personal care products and cleaning products, I just say to people, as things run out, swap it out. So your good household cleaner, guess what I discovered in the past 4 years? You don't need to have a separate window cleaner, shower cleaner, bench cleaner, floor cleaner, this cleaner, that cleaner. I just use one product, okay? One really good, non-toxic, eco-friendly, cost-effective cleaner, which I get from Young Living. I've just swapped all my personal care products and cleaning products to one company because they're a one-stop shop, and it conveniently streamlines everything to one place, which is amazing. So for busy mums like me that don't want to race around to multiple different shops, places and websites to get everything, you can purchase everything from your home, delivered to your door, and streamline it all. So that's great. There's really no excuses there. So a really good household cleaner. And then when things run out, shampoo, conditioner, toothpaste, dishwashing liquid, laundry liquid, hand soap, body wash, they're the basics. Just swap them over, and then we teach you how to do it really cost effectively, because another kind of barrier is people think I can't afford this. This is going to cost too much money. And so we kind of work with people to show them, both on the food front and the personal care front and the cleaning front, that it's not going to cost you more money. It can actually save you money, particularly when you get rid of all the other peripheral stuff that you don't need. If I go into someone's house and do a pantry raid, or go into their laundry and their bathroom, we just start taking out the stuff that you don't really need, and you just strip it back to the bare basics, and they're good quality stuff. Okay. And we teach you how to, you can dilute certain products to really stretch them out if you're on a budget. So my household cleaner cost me $1.60 for 500 ml spray bottle, $1.60. You can't get a toxic cleaner for that. So, when we tell people that, they're like, oh, okay, I can do this. Shampoo and conditioner cost me $11 because I teach them how to, dilute it to, stretch it out. And they're like, okay, I can do that. So lost my train of thought. But, yeah, so swapping things out, making it really cost effective. And that's where I was going with that. Getting rid of all the peripheral stuff. So, when I look in people's cupboards and there's there's all these, Tim Tams and this and that and that, and when you take all those out and just say, right, you're just going to make one quality cake a week, or one quality, let's make some bliss balls, or make this, and that will swap out all these hundreds of different packets. And people go, oh, okay, and getting the kids involved. And also when you're healthy and you're not sick as often, think of all the medical expenses that you're saving. There was a point in my life where my medical expenses, I think I calculated $20,000 a year, in my mid-20s, where I was out of action, just, going from this person to that person to that. And that's when it really hit home. It's going to save me a lot of money if I stay healthy and I stay out of the system and I'm independent in my healthcare. I use food as medicine. I use non-toxic cleaning products, personal care products. I stay healthy. I don't get sick. I don't need to see a plethora or an army of people. And I'm saving money, and, you're living your best, vibrant life, and you've got, more time, more energy. It's just win-win all round.
Mm. It's so, so true. I think that is a huge barrier to entry, is cost. And, oh, God, Soulla and I could show you our budgets and show you how much money we actually save having transferred over to, people think organic food is expensive. And, you can start with looking at the clean, 15 and just working off that and eating the rest organic, do small little steps. It doesn't have to be expensive. But I think for a lot of people have never even sat down, we were talking about this before, so never actually sat down and done a budget and looked at how much they actually spend per week on getting toast for breakfast on the way to work, or, getting Uber Eats a couple of times a week, or coffees. Like, my husband and I wanted to inject a bit extra into our savings, and we looked and we were both like, we spent $100 a week on takeaway coffee. $100 a week.
Up to raw cacao, whole milk, which you can do in your own home. 2 ingredients, and it's delicious, and it really, gives you that lift. Absolutely, and eating out is not cheap. Eating out is expensive.
It is expensive. So, and when people say, well, you can't cook a meal for that price, and I go, but the amount of food that you've got too is not enough to feed people. Or you look at when you get a meal from a restaurant or from a takeaway place, there's like 2 pieces of meat in there and all the rest is liquid and vegetable. Like, it's not actually a full nutrient dense and calorie dense meal. It's just not enough food. So I think it's really important for people to actually look at the belief that being healthy is too expensive. And like Soulla said, like, I've had a health condition that's cost me thousands of dollars. And so, Soulla and I have both been affected by mold. If you want to go read about that, you can go read about it on Soulla's website. We've had different financial hefty loads from that in different ways. But it really reminded me, what it must cost people who are not healthy to have a health condition.
Well, as the saying goes, if you think organic food is expensive, have you seen the cost of cancer recently? Astronomical. So, and the good thing is, once you understand that our health is less driven by our genes and more driven by epigenetics, our lifestyle choices, which we control, that to me was such a big turning point in my journey. It's like, oh my God, we're in the driver's seat. We get to choose, in a way, what our health is going to be. And that's not to say you're never going to get sick or you never, but you have then control of how you treat it, and you bounce back just so much quicker.
So true. I'm so grateful for this chat today, Soulla. You've given us so much wealth information. Like, we've only just touched the iceberg of what Soulla has in her wealth of knowledge. I cannot believe it. Like, I know a lot about health, but Soulla's exactly right. She has brought all her lawyer knowledge. Like, I showed it to my husband, who's a lawyer, her manual on this healthy swaps, and he was like, "Oh my God." I was like, "She's a lawyer." He went, "Yeah, that's a lawyer. A lawyer wrote that." It's so detailed. You literally don't even have to think. You can just follow her instructions. Totally clean out your pantry, your cleaning cupboard, your makeup cupboard, your cosmetic, everything, and get your life healthy, totally toxin-free. And also her cooking workshops are amazing because she will get broth and liver into your children without them knowing about it, and you'll do the food prep in 10 minutes, and that's what's really important. Soulla and I love to cook, but we don't spend hours cooking. Like, I actually set aside, I'm a busy mum, she's a busy mum, we both run businesses. I think I set aside 2 hours a week, and I do batch cooking, and then we just do little bits of cooking every day. So that's it for me. Like, obviously, if I was having a dinner party and I was doing all the curries and the chutneys I would spend hours, but that's from love and joy, not from necessity. And, so get onto Soulla's website and have a look at her broth, especially her broth workshop, her organ meats workshop, and her desserts. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So we really encourage you to take control of your life. Take health in your own hands. Listen to what your body's telling you. Every time you think, well, I can actually live on takeout every night of the week, or, I don't have time to cook my own food. Like, listen to what your body is telling you about that, and take the power in your hands and jump on Soulla's website and download a cooking class. Or if you're in Sydney, I encourage you to go into her store and have lunch. And did you know she even puts broth in ice cream? her brothsicles. Yeah, I'm so sorry to everyone who's not living in Sydney, because I don't think they'll make the journey to you. She also does home deliveries, meal plans. Like, I've had clients that have had cancer, and I've got Soulla to provide all their meals for them when they're in recovery. You can get it delivered to you in hospital. Like, the resources from Soulla are so endless. I was going to get you to promote yourself, but I just got so excited about everything that you do.
Healthy Swapping, their personal care products, cleaning products, and makeup. So there's a free workshop on my website on that, so they can jump onto the workshops page, and that's free. So I just want people to kick the chemicals out of their life in any way, shape, and form, and Healthy Swap to more nourishing versions.
And it's so different.
Cooking classes as bundles to save as well, if you want to look into the cooking.
Oh, awesome.
The one is really great too, because it incorporates the broth making. So do the broth workshop first, but then once you've got a handle on broth, making slow cooks is just game changing. Coming home and there's like a dinner ready for you, or for dinner parties, you can spend the entire day literally at the beach knowing there's something slow cooking at home, and just got to team it with a salad and you're done. So it's really simple.
Well, when I was single, I used to call my slow cooker my boyfriend, because I'd come home and dinner would be ready for me. And now, that both have a family, I still use it just as much. We use it pretty much every single day. That slow cooker is, I don't know, it's got years and years of oil soaked into it from all the meals that are being prepared. Thank you so much, Soulla. I really appreciate it. It's been so nice to interview you. So, your website. Please tell everyone your website.
So, staranisorganic.com, and my Instagram is also staranisorganic. So, STARANISE organic. So you can check that out.
Yeah, and I'll put all the resources for those workshops.
And if you're interested in the water filter, the water shop is where I get my RO, reverse osmosis water filter with an alkalizer. I mention my name and you'll get 20% off. You can just call them. You don't have to go visit them, and you just choose a 4-set and they just do the rest for you. It's a really good investment in your health. So I talk about the 8 foundations or the 8 pillars of health, nutrition being one, but hydration is number 2. So we really want to get a good water filter that takes out the chlorine, the fluoride, and the heavy metals. And we didn't really dive into any of the other foundations of health, but my parting comment would be just appreciate health is also health is very much multifactorial. But I firmly believe that if you nail the diet, if you nail nutrition and hydration, you're 90% there, because that's going to give you the energy and the bandwidth and the capacity to then deal with some of the other foundations of health and go, right, okay, now I can actually, have the energy and bandwidth to move my body and to get out in nature and so on and so forth. But, making the diet, nutrition, hydration really non-negotiable and just, really nailing that is going to make the most profound influence in your health.
And that's also the thing that we have the most control over. Like people really
fruit, I call it. And low-hanging fruits, because you've got to eat 2 to 3 times a day. It's not like, a lot of people think that, movement, meditation, that's kind of an additional thing I could do in my day. But everyone in the world has to eat. Okay, so then you've got a choice as, well, what do I eat? And all we're saying is, instead of eating A, eat B, because it's more nutrient dense. And we'll show you how to make it as cost effective and as quick and easy and even more delicious, And as your taste buds change, you're not going to really view A, the toxic processed food, as food. You're going to be craving B, because, you're going to listen to your body, and your body will, you're going to love how you look and feel. And so you're going to want more of that.
Oh, yeah. I can't even wear makeup. Like, I've gone to do something for someone else and had to have my makeup done, and I cannot even stand the smell of commercial makeup anymore. Become that sensitive to it. And it's so different now, right? Like when I was a kid, you viewed people who used all these natural products as these dirty looking hippies, and like their clothes were never clean, but the products are so amazing. Like my sheets are super white and our house is super clean. So it's
I think that stereotype as well of being, obliterated now.
Yeah.
So it's, clean living to me is just about stripping all the unnecessary extras out that don't serve you. Toxins in all its guises, whether it's dietary, environmental, stress, don't serve us. Okay, so when you get rid of things that don't serve you, what you're left with is, and you fill your life with things that do serve you, then that's when we can, our children can grow and function properly. We can perform our best and reach our true potential. We can be the best possible versions of ourselves. And that's why we're here on this planet, is to understand who we truly are, to evolve and grow and be the best possible versions of ourselves. And, living as, nourishingly as possible is the mechanism in order to do that.
So well said. So if you've taken away something from this podcast and implemented it in your life, even it's as simple as just going and throwing out that canola oil right now out of your cupboard, please DM Soulla or myself. We love to hear from you, and, we live to inspire and help people create change. So we'd love to hear from you. So DM us on our Instagram, have a look at Healthy Swaps with Soulla, and I'll upload all the resources in the show notes so you can get all those tips from Soulla at length. Thank you so much, Soulla. Loved having you on the show. I'm Leila Lutz, and you've been listening to The Body Never Lies. If you haven't yet, please go to your favourite podcast app and subscribe, rate and review this podcast. All the resources and references from this episode are waiting for you on my website, leilalutz.com. Just click on podcast and look for this episode. Now join me next week for another episode of The Body Never Lies. Thank you so much for listening.
Free.